The following is a conversation with Nikki Foster, an artist who I came in contact through a correspondence course. I loved how Nikki referenced literature in her exploration of different mediums that she was playing with: painting, drawing, and photography. One particular photograph that Nikki took a year ago now is of her daughter Eppie in her mother's bedroom. I'm not going to go into this too much because this is the purpose of these conversations, to go too much into one image. So we get to the kind of granular essence of how an artist sees the world, captures the world, and in this case, in one photograph. I want to thank Nikki for this conversation because she is the first to brave this, for lack of a better term, podcast format. But I felt the conversation was so good that in some ways Nikki's contribution is the bar and the template for further conversations with artists. I hope you enjoy. Thanks, Nikki, for being part of this anyway.
It's okay. You're welcome.
And you're first up. So perhaps first of all, I'll just kind of outline what this is.
Okay.
I'll just read this a little bit out. The motivation behind prosody16 is to invoke the voice of the artist in a physical way through a recorded conversation, or audio only. So that's one thing I've become kind of aware of, because we're not using visuals, even though we're talking about visuals. There's going to be a kind of emphasis on description, actually, because we're going to have to describe this image or images throughout the conversation. So what is voiced in the recorded conversation, images and words, will be developed into a screen-printed 16-page A5 zine. I've thought it would be better format to do it A5 rather than A4 rather than A5. The first initial idea was to have it A5, but I've been making A5 zines over the last few months, and I just kind of want to switch it to an A4 because there's more scope in terms of scale.
Yeah.
And blank spaces on a page, actually. That, something like that, something more poetic. So this is an opportunity to not rehash current tendencies, but to explore new ideas and territories behind the established preserve of the artist. I'm willing into voice and aesthetics of risk, the dark register that torments and expands the consumerist and digitized image of the artist and their work, via the solicitation of viscerally awkward images and words where fantasy and dream logic run riot. And then I reference the late David Lynch in relation to that, to set the mood. I also said to you in the last email, I was thinking that we might begin with the single photograph of your daughter and then expand out from there, discuss the lead up, moment and motivation when you decided to take that photograph, and subsequent photograph after that you shared by email. I still want to have some limits in place and try to keep these conversations compressed in terms of examples, exhausting the possibilities of viewpoints and perspectives, both technical and emotional, and then conceive a zine from that conversation that uses that single image, almost a singularity, to convey, which is also a definition for to transport, other possibilities in terms of images, past and future. So I suppose my first question in relation to this image, the context in which I saw this image first was at the RHA. You presented it during the correspondence course. And my first reaction to the image was kind of real surprise, I suppose, in the context of the other work you were presenting in terms of painting and drawing. It kind of arrested me in space. I don't know whether it was Damien Flood that was there that day.
It was Neve O'Malley.
Yeah. Yeah, it just arrested me, and I was kind of left with all these associations with this image in that context. So perhaps begin maybe what led up to that.
Okay, so I've kind of been thinking about childhood a lot. And like I work a lot with old photographs, and I'm trying not to do that so much now, but that aside, I wanted to kind of recreate those photographs that I would have been so familiar with in terms of the visual quality. There's something about digital for me, like I know you see some beautiful digital photography, but there's something about the quality of it being so perfect. There's like a remove for me that I just become disinterested. And I like the texture of these photographs. And I would have, like, on my degree, I did a photography elective. So for the 3 years, for the first 2 years, the third year I did my dissertation, but the first 2 years, like, you can choose. So the first year I did, I think, photography. The second year I did philosophy. So you study that alongside your degree, which for me was painting. So yeah, like I would have used my old Pentax during that time. And then it got stolen. So I didn't go back to photography after that. I didn't have a darkroom, and it just didn't seem sustainable, but it's something that I always loved. But when like digital became really big, I just lost interest. But then I saw this opportunity when I started taking these disposable camera pictures to kind of reignite that enthusiasm. Yeah, so like in terms of taking the photographs and this photograph of Eppie, I wanted to take photographs of things that are around me every day, which is obviously my kids. And I've been thinking a lot about like not just my childhood, but their childhood and like different things that overlap. So yeah, you have to like make a hand signal when I need to stop talking. You want me to keep going?
Yeah, well, like what I would say is like it's I suppose why I was arrested by it, and we spoke about this earlier, is that it's your own child.
Yeah.
And someone who has children, I'm going to have a kind of empathy or sympathy towards taking an image in that context. And there's a kind of, what I would say, there's something both peaceful and visceral about it as an image, in that the flash on the back window is very kind of, you can see that it's a kind of a nighttime photograph.
You know, it's actually not. This is the interesting thing I find about these photographs. Sorry to interrupt you there, but yeah, the contrast, the high contrast. It wasn't nighttime, it was daytime. But I think it's because if you're indoors, you can only get like a 2 to 3 meter like light density or something that you can't see that it's daylight outside. So yeah, it is interesting that it looks like nighttime.
That's brilliant, because I suppose that's why we're doing this. We're kind of zoning in on one image because there's so many assumptions made. So like the flash on the window, I created a monochrome of it just to get the tones, and then it looks more like night even in the monochrome. So I was kind of looking at it in terms of a screen printed image and what that would look like. And I was just kind of imagining it in terms of just the textures of the bed on it. Maybe perhaps describe the image first. Do you want me to show my screen and just show you the image?
I have the image here as well. Yeah.
Do you want to just describe it actually, what image we're talking about?
Okay. So this is my room in our house, upstairs. Eppie is in her pajamas. So they're like new pajamas that she got from her grandmother from Marks and Spencer's. It's kind of a print. It's kind of an Art Deco print to me, like with the swans. Um, and they're really lovely actually. They're kind of silky. Um, and so she's wearing those. She's quite proud of those. So I am changing the beds. And Eppie's really funny because I'll be doing something like changing the beds, and I'm actually a disaster for always doing stuff, like not really sitting still that often. And so she will come in, and she's kind of funny because it'll be like her way of doing an intervention and making me stop. And she'll like lie on the middle of whatever I'm doing. So I'm changing the beds, but she's come and lie on the bed, and she wanted to talk to me about something. Um, so in a way, I suppose, like she's lying down, and what got me about the way she was lying was her hair. She's got really beautiful hair. It's kind of long. It's really blonde. Well, it's kind of a strawberry blonde, so it's not losing its color, which she's lucky to have. It's very straight. It's not like my hair. And she is quite proud of it, like, and she should be. And But today, it was this day that she was talking to me. It was quite greasy, and it was kind of splayed out behind her on the kind of folded duvet and quilt topper. And it kind of reminded me of, and I think you mentioned it in my crit as well, the Edvard Munch woodcuts with the hair, the vampire ones. And that's what it reminded me of, the hair, this kind of like quite dominant feature of the photograph, because it takes up almost a good bit of the center panel. And then above, I wasn't really thinking about the window and this reflection at the time because it was day, but above you have the reflection of the flash in the window with her legs, which are bare because her pajamas are shorts. And then like you have the curtain on the right. The curtains are, so we moved into this house, I think about a year and a half ago, maybe a year. Yeah, something like that. And the curtains are the original curtains of the house, so they're kind of old fashioned. And the windowsill's slightly chipped as well. There's lots of things to do, like, and so actually the flash and the bare legs make me uncomfortable. There's one thing that makes me a bit uncomfortable about this picture because it kind of feels a bit, I don't know, like she's a young girl. I mean, like, and it's interesting about Edvard Munch because he has those paintings, Cool Puberty, of a young girl on the bed sitting. I think she's maybe naked down to her torso at least. And so for me, that kind of made me uncomfortable about the photograph. So what else could I say? I mean, she has this mark on her cheek. So Eppie has like a large freckle on her cheek, and I've told her to leave it alone and not pick at it. But she, she's 12, so like she kind of feels like she could pick it off and then it'll go away. And I've tried to explain to her it's a freckle, it's not a spot, like if you pick at it, it's going to come back after it heals. So like it's this thing, she has to kind of get used to it being there. So that's why she has this mark on her cheek. And what she has in her hands that you can't see in the photograph, but it's to one side, is she has a comforter called Rosie, which is something I brought her when she was about 6 months. It's this little rabbit. It's like a blanket. And she still uses it and sucks her thumb. And so when she took this photograph, she put it to one side. So she's quite conscious of this Rosie. So that's probably by her hand, which is not in the photograph. So yeah, that's like, what else can I say? Is that enough description?
That's wonderful. It's actually wonderful to hear parents talking about their kids because they light up. And it's kind of I kind of always wish that artists would talk about their art in the same way because there's usually a kind of they like I light up like I there's lots of things you said there which are really interesting, and I think it was my first reaction to this image that it had that softness, that kind of playfulness, just with the hair across the bed, the clothing, the duvets. But that when you spoke about that reflection, which I thought was nighttime in the flash, and you get the bare legs and stuff, it's very nuanced. So you have to sit with the image. You have to be in a situation, which we were the first time we talked about this image. You have to sit with it and be kind of sat in front of it for a period of time before you investigate it. But what is lovely is the story about how, there's not to go all psychoanalytical, but there is this thing about transitional objects, which I always find, and they're healthy things, like transitional objects like blankets and stuff that kids have. My son, Noah, who's also 12, has this little hearse, which he's had since it's a furry little teddy bear hearse. And he's had that since he was like, I don't know, 5 or 6. And he's become more aware of it as your daughter has, and it only comes out in certain situations, where there is anticipation of an event it will arrive or something like that. But it's interesting how these objects, and I was thinking recently, I suppose I was thinking around this image, because this image has got me to think a lot, actually, being a parent and looking at imagery and what imagery we use. And it's really got me to think about artists and not just children using transitional objects like blankets and teddy bears, but artists using art as a kind of transitional object. I've come across, and you mentioned Edvard Munch, and there's been papers written on Edvard Munch about his use of his own paintings as transitional objects, that she still has this, as Noah has this, and it's gone past the phase of having it. But we always have these things. We don't actually notice that we carry them through life. And it's interesting that artists make these objects, or they take pictures of the world as you have. And there's something about, and I probably covet images a lot of the time by artists, that they give me a sense of my place in the world, and they're the special ones. So I suppose that's what this project is about that singularity, that single object. But there was something something I came across. I'd like you to react to this. It was something, it's about transitional objects, but it's Mary Kelly. I was looking through this catalogue recently, and Mary Kelly has these artworks. They're called postpartum documents, and they were made in the 1970s. And they're just little text works on little labels.
I remember I've seen them, yeah. They're beautiful.
Yeah.
And she has the labels they would have worn when they were in the hospital.
Exactly, yeah. So she did all these diary entries on them. So she became very vested when she became pregnant and had a child. She became very invested in not just the domestic space, but the whole early years when you're in the trenches of motherhood, and you're kind of, you get out, but you get out with perhaps the pram and stuff, and like those kinds of things, there's little escape. And she wrote this thing, and I actually probably will have to get it up on my phone because the text is so small on these labels. I'm starting to lose my sight, I think, recently. I've started to notice it deteriorate. So there's this image, and I'll just show you. So she writes on it, I didn't see Kay, which is her daughter, much this week because of the Brighton show. Now I've noticed he started stuttering. Dr. Spock, which is probably, she just uses this name. Dr. Spock must be a psychoanalyst or something, or a psychiatrist, says it's due to mother's tenseness or father's discipline. My work has been underlined by the appearance of this symptom because I realize it depends on belief in what I'm doing as a mother as well as an artist. I feel I can't carry on with it. So all these are kind of confessional statements that Kelly wrote in the 70s as an artist in a very different time as well, especially for female artists who weren't getting the same representation as male artists. But she definitely embraced this thing of motherhood. Today it's more, I see it way more, I suppose, in especially artists who become mothers. They do embrace that in their work, and it transitions into it, and it's allowed to. It's not seen as something that is desperate or anything. It's something really rich. It's a rich engagement, especially in photography, I would say. There's something about photography that's really doing it well. And maybe it's the instantaneous approach of photography, or, the time of photography as well. It doesn't take too much time to take a photograph. So what do you think about that? Just because this image sits outside of your other work, and you do, like what I gained from talking with you over, especially last year during the correspondence course, was kind of a love, a passion of reading, of words, and reflection. And I suppose a reflection through literature about your own work as well. There's a kind of a connection between both. And you did bring up in one of the emails Lolita, and how Lolita is 12 also in Vladimir Nabokov's book. So I'm throwing a lot of stuff there at you, but like, I suppose the Mary Kelly thing, the Lolita thing, being a mother, making art, all that stuff together. What do you think about that? Do you have anything to say in relation to those things?
Yeah, like I think that, so when I had Eppie, like I was working at the National Portrait Gallery full time. Like, so when I finished my degree, I wanted to stay living in London, so it wasn't a case of, getting a studio, being an artist, really, because you have to pay rent. So I got a job, and then I did a PGCE because I thought maybe I could teach, and get better money. And then I just found it too much. Like, I did my PGCE in a college in South London. It was quite intense, and the behavioural stuff was, I don't know, I'm better at it now, let's put it that way. But at the time I was 23, and then so I was working at the National Portrait Gallery, and I stayed there, and I did invigilating for a few years, and then I kind of climbed up into digital programs, and I used to work with the archive material in digital programs. So I would, and actually I loved it because you have to go for all the old portraiture, and you have to write like historically where what it's about, and then I had to do stuff like family tree projects where you research the lineage of a family and stuff. So when I had Eppie, I was in that full-time role. I just finished my master's. I did my master's part-time in the evenings, and it was kind of messed up because when I got pregnant with Eppie, I found out I was in my first trimester when I was doing my dissertation, and I was really sick, and I was working full time. And so I said to my the head of the course, I'm pregnant and I'm working full time. Can I get like a bit of an extension on my dissertation? And she was a woman, and she just looked at me like, this is a choice, like you're not sick, you're pregnant. And I was like, oh. It was a bit of a wake-up call, of how it was kind of a like a baptism of fire maybe of how motherhood was going to be. And it was like, okay, now I have to start making some real choices. Like when I had Eppie and she was born, and it was quite a difficult labor. Um, After she was born, I was like, right, I have to kind of now invest in things I really want to do and use that time as kind of proactively as I can. So when she was born, I started the zine Awesome Monster. I started doing little drawings. That took a good bit of time because, my husband was working full time. He works in animation. So in NPC in London, it was long hours. Like he wouldn't get back till like 8 in the evening. So it was kind of a long day with a baby. And so kind of we went through all the all the emotions together of kind of new motherhood, I suppose. And I think I struggled with it a lot, and I felt quite isolated. Like my sister lived in London, but she's not a maternal person at all. Like she doesn't have kids. She's older than me. She's 44. And she chose not to have kids. So she is not interested in the whole baby thing. So I think I would have seen her maybe once maximum when Eppie was a baby. She lived in North London, I was South London. My uncle, who I'm actually close with, lived around the corner. But he wouldn't be great in he's a really lovely man, and he's eccentric, and he's got an amazing mind, but he's not good in the practical sense. Like he's a real bachelor, So like when it came to kind of day-to-day stuff, I guess I felt kind of like on my own in that time. And I had to get on with it. And I think it was a struggle. So I can understand why someone like Mary Kelly might use that struggle to make artwork. I can feel a real empathy towards that art that is made in that context. And I think that since you have that experience, it's something to take with you and use, because I don't know, like it's a way of processing what's happening without, if you feel like you can't really talk to other people about what's happening, it's a way of having a conversation on your own about what's happening. And I feel that is what, after I had Eppie and I wasn't working full time anymore, I felt like I could develop that conversation with my work in a way I had never been able to before. I went back to the portrait gallery part-time, but then we moved out of London because we couldn't afford to get somewhere with a garden. And we moved to Kent for a year, but then that didn't work out, so Alan got the job here in Dublin. And I guess since having Eppie, and then I had Finn, and we moved to Dublin, it was a really intense time because we moved here when he was 6 weeks, and it wasn't a good time for me in terms of, I already had a lot of, I would say, after Eppie, like I was never diagnosed with anything, but I would say I had kind of this kind of postnatal anxiety, if you like. I don't like labeling these things too much because like I say, I wasn't diagnosed with anything, but with Finn, I think I thought I was capable of that move and doing all those things, but I wasn't. So I guess you find out your limitations by testing them. And I think that was a big test that I failed in one sense. I mean, everybody's fine, but I realized, okay, that was probably too much, but I thought it was going to be fine. And it was fine in the end, but it was a challenge, big challenge. So I think in terms of like the work with the photography, I like taking the photographs because I can do it, like you say, anytime I have my camera, I take a picture. Now, the interesting thing about the camera I'm using at the moment, I'm thinking about buying a different camera, but these things get expensive. But I'll take a film and there'll be literally like, out of a film of 30, there'll be about 3 good photographs, like in my mind. So it's can be disappointing and expensive. But look, I'm going to keep doing it. Yeah, so like when I had Finn, I did the awesome monster thing with Eppie, and I was doing these little drawings and I put it together. And what made me want to do that was in Soho, where Alan worked, there was like a comic book shop called Gosh Comics, and it had a small press table. And the small press, now I'm not that, I was never one of those kids that was into comic books, like Marvel and all of that. But on the small press table, there was really interesting, like little handmade publications. And they seemed a lot more personal and more quirky. The drawings and the graphic art and were just completely different, like a big variation. And I felt like it was something that I could work with, those ideas. And you know yourself, like there's something about a zine or like a small press publication which is a bit more intimate. So I felt like I could work with those drawings and those ideas with the drawings I was doing since Eppie was born. And a lot of the drawings I was doing were one-handed because I was expressing like breast milk and stuff. And I would spend a lot of time doing that when Eppie was a baby because she had tongue tie. So, and they've got quite strict rules about getting the tongue tie. I got it done with Finn and Eden, but with Eppie, I didn't get it done because they've got quite strict rules about cutting the tongue tie. Also, I was a bit anxious about getting it done with Eppie. With the other two, I was like, that would be grand. But yeah, so with Eppie, she didn't get the tongue tie operation done, so she struggled in that way. We both struggled with the feeding, so I would express a lot. And so the zine is something I developed over the first 2 years, and then with Finn, I moved here, and I kind of didn't do much of anything for a while. I was doing drawing. I entered a couple of postcards into.
So that was kind of the only thing I was doing.
There's a show here that does
with Finn.
The postcards
every year.
I had to kind of pull things back together a little bit because, like, I don't want it to sound dramatic, but I think I'd started to unravel a little bit in some ways. So I had to kind of say, right, I had to kind of start to set some kind of own goals. So I started reading every day, like making it a habit that I kept every day. And I started really like low expectations, like read every day and have a shower every day. Sounds gross, I know, but we're setting the bar low. So, and then I would spend a lot of time outdoors with the two of them as well. Like, and then like once they both started, like Eppie started the ECC and then Finn, and then like I start to get more into a rhythm of making work again from the reading and different things. But like it's a slow build, you know the way. So yeah, and then I got a job here, but I think that's where I've come at with the work in terms of motherhood. It became more essential to make work about. I'm sorry if I diverge from your original question, but it became more essential to make work about what I was experiencing as a way of kind of processing it, coping with it, I suppose, and thinking about. I felt like from my childhood, there were things I could take away and think, right, I don't want that necessarily to be part of my children's childhood. Do you know what I mean? So there was definitely part of that thought process as well in terms of the work. Yeah. Anyway. Sorry.
No, brilliant answer. And I love how you just free flow and freestyle into different ideas. And it's not tangential at all. It's all interconnected in a way.
Okay, I hope so.
Now, what is interesting is that you, like, especially in early motherhood and stuff like this, you're in this kind of very intimate, use that word intimate, around zine making. Like it's more intimate. It's also more practical. It's doable. I've found that as well by making work, especially in the studio attached to my house. I have a lot of freedom by, especially this idea of the zine as something quite small and compressed, and you can do a lot with it. And you can be confessional, you can be playful within within this very strict parameter, maybe A5, A4, whatever it is. But like going back to this idea, I suppose the content of your work is what you've outlined there, and that's kind of seeping into it a little bit. But you're also like looking at different forms of art making. You're taking photographs, you're painting, you're reading, you're doing all these things, these moves. And what the photograph, in a way, that photograph illustrates is this kind of, for me anyway, a kind of, and maybe it's photography, a kind of, there's a separation a little bit. You're not embedded in it, so the example of Mary Kelly is that she's using onesies, she's using labels from the hospital, she's embedded, like she's in the trenches of it. She's even has these images of her kind of posed as like the Madonna and Child. They're very casual. You have to kind of look at them for a long time to gather that up, but they are kind of casual family photographs, but she is embedded in that process. But like what the photograph feels, she's older, there's a kind of distance, and there's something really conceptually rich about it. And I was thinking, just because you brought up Lolita and that email, and I'm a very big fan of Nabokov's writing, the playfulness in it and the kind of chess playing in it in a certain way, the way he switches characters and plays with pseudonyms and all this kind of stuff. But what is interesting about this image in relation to Nabokov is that there's something in Nabokov especially around Lolita, that there's content, there's the whole visceral content of the novel. But there's also how he aestheticizes that. So how he uses words, in a beautiful way. So there's something glittering about his prose, there's something. So when he's describing something. So what is interesting is that your image is a very everyday image in a bedroom. And it's not in a kind of, it's not in a, like, it was interesting when Nabokov tried to publish Lolita first, some of the editors came back and says, why do you have to, they wanted him to reposition the novel in a more arid landscape. Like, so bad things happen in bad places. Whereas in Nabokov's it's by the swimming pool, it's in a housing estate, it's in the everyday. It's what you used that word earlier, the everyday. And what is lovely about this image, it has both things going on. And it's her own baggage as parents, fear, anxiety, all that kind of stuff that we bring to it. So probably it's an image I'm not saying it's an image for a parent or of a parent of a child of a certain age, but it does have that. That's why it arrested me. And it wasn't anything to do, my daughter's younger. So it was about my son, really. But I was thinking about my daughter as well. So, and then I was thinking about Nabokov, and I was thinking about all this other stuff in the background. So it brought that in. But like I suppose what I'm trying to get at is that the difference between, and this is an old hat binary, but the difference between content and form. Like aesthetic form. So there's a piece that's always brought up about Nabokov's Lolita is where she's playing tennis. And this beautiful prose about the form of Lolita when she's hitting a ball. And it's all about that, the shape of her Achilles heel, whatever it is, okay? Yeah. But she's really bad at tennis. Her form is perfect. In the eyes of Humbert, but the results are imperfect, like the content. So it's all on the surface in a certain way. So this image you took doesn't seem aesthetically perfect. It's cut off at the body. You can see the sleeves of the shirt. It's cut at, above the the elbows. But it's kind of something to do with the hair, maybe, and then the negative spaces behind it. All this, there's stuff going on, and there is photographic kind of composition in it where it's doing all that stuff anyway. But like, when you took it, did you, and I suppose when you presented it actually, and then when you submitted to this, were you thinking about those things in terms of form? Like, because sometimes we think about art, it's all about the form. And the content is arbitrary, it's later, it's like, like in psychoanalysis, there's two processes. There's primary processes where immediate things that happen and everything is in flux. And then secondary process is when you reflect on it, like what we're doing now, we're doing the secondary process. So you did the primary process, you did the hard work in picking up your camera and bam, like instantaneously. So where do you sit in relation to form, like especially in relation to this photograph and maybe other things as well?
Yeah. Okay. When I took this photograph, I felt like it was kind of, what do they call it when you're dividing up a composition? It's like... the
rule of thirds or something?
Yeah, the rule of thirds. So, and then you have your negative space and you have your busy spaces. So for me, it was like, and I kind of like, and it was really interesting. My mentor for my main mentor on Terps is someone called David Leeson, but my guest mentor was Geraldine Swain, and she mentioned how, and it's funny because I haven't even been especially aware I was doing it until she mentioned it, but she said it's funny how a lot of my paintings have got this kind of geometric quality where I'm dividing up the composition and cutting the composition and cropping it in ways where you can't necessarily flow your kind of your led around the composition in a kind of a jutted way. And it kind of, she liked it. She was responding. She said it was an interesting way of dividing up the paintings. But I think with this as well, I liked the way behind Eppie you've got the blocks of the window, so the rectangular shards of the window, panes of the window, and then you've got kind of this slit of a radiator which goes horizontally, and then you've got the horizontal quilts, which are softer, and they kind of give a little bit for the body. But then you've got Eppie coming down again as a vertical line. So I kind of like the way you have this divided up. You've got your verticals and your horizontals. And a lot of them are quite harsh, but there's also a bit of give. So it's kind of, I thought that was kind of interesting when I saw her lying on those folded quilts. In terms of her expression and the way she was looking down, I felt it gave her kind of like this thoughtful quality, which she has. Like I'm always like saying to her, she's going to be like a philosopher or something, because she's a thinker, like, so I liked the way that came across in the photograph because it seemed genuine. And even though I said I didn't like the reflection of her legs in the window, I like the way she's like aesthetically playing with her leg, because it gives it that nervous quality, which I feel at that age, when you're 12 and you're coming into kind of, puberty or adolescence or whatever, you have that quality about your body where you're nervous about it and not necessarily wanting to be exposed or unsure about what's happening in general. So I felt that the hand on the leg, on the exposed leg, gave it that quality of anxious, nervous, unsure. Like in terms of Nabokov, like, and it's funny you say about Lolita, because I read The Enchanter not long ago. Is it Enchanter? Enchantress? Enchanter? We watched that film, and he kept saying Enchantress, so I might be getting confused. This week, Nosferatu.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, that was a bit mad, but yeah, like, so I think it's the Enchanter, and it's interesting. I forgot the scene, like the kind of with the tennis, but the Enchanter is on roller skates, and he describes the Achilles. So it must have been his thing, but like it's interesting with Eppie and the coins on the bed and how it reminded me the other photograph of that moment. I felt like there are these moments now in her kind of approaching adolescence that are quite like formative with me, with us as parents, but with me, with her friends. And like I have this feeling that you can get them wrong. And it's interesting. I don't know if you saw the series Adolescence that came out recently.
Yes.
I know everyone was talking about it, but there was, and I was interested in that series, the way they played on that, with that scene with him and the dad and the football, and the way he'd looked away when, you know, he'd made mistakes and stuff. And it had been, and it seems like such a simple thing for to happen, and not something that was aggressive or like a big thing, like he didn't, like wasn't beating him or anything, but it was something that really stuck in the child's mind. And I feel like these are things like with the coins on the bed with Nabokov and Lolita, these are things where there's like a switch, where there's like a change. Like in the book, when that happens, like before, there's like an innocence around this. He loves her and he thinks she's beautiful, and, you know, and it's kind of romanticized, this kind of pedophilia. But then there's like this change where he throws the coins on the bed, and it's like a mic drop, you know, like, oh, this is actually what it is. It's, you know, monstrous or whatever. But yeah, I felt like that scene with that, not scene, but that photograph of Eppie on the bed where it's high contrast reminded me, because it's so dark, you can't see her expression. Like there could be anything happening in that moment. And so I feel like with the photographs, and with this photograph of Eppie with the hair, it's a difficult photograph for me in the sense that maybe I shouldn't stop a moment with Eppie and take a photograph, you know? She might be trying to talk to me about something, and when you take a photograph, it's kind of, it stops everything, you know, it's a distraction. So that there's that quality to it as well, I think, which is probably why I put it up for this and for the RHA, because I can see that these are intimate moments with her which are interesting, and like visually it worked out well, but maybe there's a question of like showing these moments, or kind of maybe these moments should still be private. So I'm interested in that private, public, artists using your own experience, you know, conundrum.
Yeah, like there's a wonderful tension there, isn't there? Between, that's a terrible word, wonderful, but like when I think about art, like, not to sound pretentious, but like art with a capital A, like there's always, I feel, a tension between two things going on. That's what makes it art. And then you're either uncomfortable or you're arrested in some way and you don't know why. And that's when art does its work on you, maybe. And it's always what baggage you bring to it. And of course, I'm bringing my own parental baggage to it. So that's why it's arresting me. But then, as I spoke about earlier, the form of it, there's something really fascinating about the form and the technique, and what you spoke about, these kind of aggressive angles or kind of structures within it. You are, like, a lot of people will say, oh, like it seems like she's slipping off the photograph.
I see what you mean, yeah.
And there's no anchor. But the hair seems to, because it creates this horizon line, it kind of captures the top of the duvet. It was interesting also, you talk about, I thought that was lovely what you spoke about in terms of taking a photograph with your children. So I found this actually when we go to sports events. In the beginning, I used to record, just say in gymnastics, my daughter doing something. And the first time I did it, I realized I wasn't there. I was actually in the camera, and I never did it again. Every time we went to events after that, I just left my phone and the camera at home because I felt I missed something physical. And it was interesting what you said earlier, how Eppie comes into the room to interject, And there's something, I think children do this a lot of the time. My daughter does this all the time when my wife and me are heading for a walk together. She doesn't like us. There's kind of this idea of omnipotence, I think, around children, that they want to be the center. A lot of people talk about this, but especially in relation to their parents. And when we go walking and maybe we hold hands, she does interject between the hands all the time, like, oh, you can't go. So there's this whole dynamic going on. And I think there's something about photography, how it interjects, but it takes away experience. It doesn't allow you. Maybe it allows you. It gives you the fantasy of being there, but then afterwards you've lost something or something. Yeah. But it exists in the photograph as here. I was wondering about, because the second photograph that you talked about there, the high contrast image, and it's also in the same room. It's landscape. It's way high contrast. There's a kind of crest of daylight around the head, kind of a halo, a little half halo or whatever. And it seems like it's morning or evening. I'm not going to even speculate this time.
Yeah.
Could be nighttime, but there's lots of silhouettes in it anyway. And there's that ivy still creeping across the window. Like when you compare and contrast these two images, because they're of the same subject matter, what do you see in them? Because the first one was the one we're talking about today, but the second one, How do you feel about that second one in relation to the first one? Do they go together? I'm just thinking in terms of, as we push this forward into a manifestation of a screen printed zine or something, how do you see this kind of revisiting scene? What the motivation is different now, isn't it? It's changed.
And Eppie has come in again, and she's talking to me. What drew me to the image is that you can't see the expression on her face. You can see that her hair is behind her ear in some way. And there's a mystery there. And I'm trying to think about mystery in terms of the images and mystery for me as well. Because I think, you can be so close to the work that you don't see. I often think I'm finished with work, or you can be so close to the work that you don't see it. Whereas I'm kind of getting more interested in images where there is mystery in the image for me as well. So I think this image offers this to me. Also in the sense that you can look through that it's kind of completely blacked out mainly, except for, again, these kind of geometric shapes where you've got the window panes, but also the rooftops. You've got also the natural silhouettes of the plants and the ivy. But the rooftops kind of really could be anywhere, they could be where I grew up. They could be in London, it's kind of, it's quite, it would be obviously in a suburb or a city, but I kind of like that obscurity to it, but it gives you clues as to where a person could be. And I like those qualities to it. In relation to the other one, they're in the same place, but you wouldn't necessarily know that as a somebody viewing the photograph, which is interesting. I don't know if I consciously took this photograph thinking about the previous photograph. But my room is somewhere where Eppie will often come and talk to me a lot. Whether I'm at my dressing table or folding, washing, or, doing any of those things, she will come in and talk to me in that space. So, I've got a few pictures of her around the window actually at different times, which is interesting. So yeah, I don't see them related in some senses, but through my own personal experience, they are definitely related. So yeah, there's a two conflicting narratives there. Does that answer your question, or?
Yeah, no, it does. It does. I suppose I'm looking forward now to, what a zine could be, in terms of, what we've been talking about. I started to look at this image of Eppie, and I started to just play around with it in terms of screen printing. But like I see, this could be why I'm bringing up the second image is because it could be the possibility of more images. And what does that mean? And different ways in which, to approach that. Because when you take one image of a subject, when you do a second one, it does change it, or like you start to create a relational frame.
I know what you mean.
Screen printing always for me is always about kind of repetition or a kind of compression of things. Like it's weird. Screen printing is very like photography in that it always feels detached, unlike painting. So it's like the photograph. The camera is always between you and the image that your photo or the reality. There's always a detachment in it. So it has a kind of natural affinity with photography, and repetition and additioning. But it's kind of, I'm thinking in that way in terms of the zine. This is the first, of course, conversation, but it's just to kind of unpack that. It was weird this week. I was playing around with this image and I screen printed, which you're meant to, with ink for paper. Okay, so screen print is specifically for paper. But then I played around with this black ink that was for fabric on paper. And it had a completely different effect, a heavier. The image felt heavier rather than light. And so it's those things that perhaps might be really interesting to investigate, like heavy images, light images, but and how you would resolve that series in a 16-page A4 zine, and how our conversation would, the word of the day, kind of interrogate or, kind of interject into the imagery, how it would be placed within that and how do you go together and having lots of space between them or something. So, so that's something I suppose to think about. I suppose, like, because we're up on an hour, I was just thinking that, is there any artworks, just to end on this maybe, is there any artworks or books or whatever it is that kind of influence you? Like, what comes to mind when I say an author or a book or an artist or an artwork? Like,
oh, I've been so in this right now because I finished Terps on Saturday and I've been like really trying to figure something out. I don't think I got closer yesterday, and then today I was like, So I was reading about Camus, and is that how you pronounce it, Camus?
Albert Camus, yeah.
Yeah, so I was reading about his one on exile, and I was trying to figure out this feeling, this kind of metaphysical feeling of like not belonging to a place. And I was trying to find this for a long time, a reference to this feeling. And I was thinking about it before as well when you mentioned Bajanada last year. And then I was like reading lots of things around this. Who was I reading? So I was looking at Epicurus, and I was looking a lot at Emile Chiron as well. And then it just wasn't working, and it was very frustrating. And then I found this yesterday. So I just finished that. And in relation to these images, I guess for me, it relates this feeling of exile to this kind of home, the idea of home, and like, you know, and I'm sure you're not living close to where you grew up either. So everybody has this when you come into adulthood and you have this, your own family, and you're trying to build this home and then making it feel like a home. And Deborah Levy writes about this a lot as well. Like I don't think it's something exclusive to mothers, but when you're a mother and you have this kind of responsibility of family and building a home and making it homely, like what does that even mean? You know. So I think for me, this photograph, like trying to build a home for a family, like, and not really feeling that you can, like, really not knowing how to embrace this responsibility is part of these photographs for me. Like, obviously I try to do that, but yeah, like I think I've been thinking about that a lot. So I think Deborah Levy and her there's a free book series which starts with the cost of living, I think, and I was thinking about that a lot recently, and then finding, like, reading that Camus there recently about exile is something that I would think about with these photographs, in terms of I want to try and make this more homely, this idea of being in a, like, my kids growing up in South Dublin and a Dublin suburb, like this idea of being here now in comparison to where I grew up, which is quite a different place. So probably those books. In terms of artists, I've started looking a lot at and it sounds kind of random, but I was looking at Piero della Francesca a lot recently, but also Degas. I've been looking a lot at his monoprints and his pastel drawings, because I think with Degas, for me, there's something quite like, and I know a lot of people say about the painting with the hair, where he's combing the hair. No, the nurse is combing the hair, or someone, and it's like a red painting. But like all of them, for me, there's something like, and I was always interested in Edvard Munch, and I still love like Edvard Munch and looking at his books. I have a few of his books, and a lot of the expressionists, like Kirchner and different ones. Like I always loved that work. Café Collets as well, the printmaker. But like for me recently, Degas really got me, because there's something very brutal about a lot of his work, in terms of how he crops the figure, like, and you know, dancers and ballet dancers, the way they kind of twist their limbs in this weird way, it's really unsettling to see. But because we know that they're dancers, we're like, well, that's what ballet dancers do. But then actually it's a body, you know, it's a body like twisting in this strange, like the legs are going at these weird angles, and he's really cropping in on that in some of them, and the shoulders. And they all kind of look abnormal, their bodies are abnormally shaped, and they all look very young and small, and they're twisting their bodies in these weird ways. Like, when I remove myself from the fact it's Degas and I look at the images themselves, there's something very brutal about them, and I've got really interested in that recently. So I would say those books and that artist at the moment, but it's changing all the time. I'm trying not to let it change all the time, because I am interested in what you say about exhausting the possibilities of an artist or a painting, or, you know, all of these things, because I don't want to always be jumping from one thing to the next thing, which I can do. So I'm trying to, like, and I am doing it more with the paintings. I'm staying with a painting for longer now than I ever was. So that's good. But yeah, I would say those artists in those books right now.